man. Well, it's good to be back on another open floor. The American dream rests on the promise of upward mobility. And for generations, that promise was encapsulated in a single phrase: the starter home. It was the first rung of the ladder on financial stability. But today, the data suggests that for a generation of first-time buyers in places like Maryland, that ladder has been pulled up. And this episode was actually sparked from a deep conversation that I was invited to have earlier last week at NewDay USA headquarters in Maryland. They have headquarters in Fulton, Maryland. NewDay USA is a very niche company. They specialize in refinancing programs for veterans. And that's all they do. They're great at what they do. But they have a very interesting business model. And a lot of the people that are getting into the mortgage business fresh out of college end up interning or getting their first job here, where they can kind of learn the ropes of one of the more complex things in finance, the mortgage. So it is pretty cool that NewDay invite local leaders on a monthly basis in different industries to come and talk about things that they feel like their employees can get benefit from. And this discussion that I was invited to come and speak on was about paths to homeownership. And what we're arguing today on today's episode is that the traditional starter home, that small entry-level property that's really accessible to, middle income, first-time buyers, is functionally dead in Maryland. And it's been replaced by an unattainable price point. This isn't really just an economic issue. It's really a structural source of rising wealth inequality and kind of a huge generational stagnation. And we start with kind of an on-the-ground reality for this and what barriers are. We talked about what barriers local lenders and buyers are kind of discussing right now. But I'll give the audience, I wish there were cameras for our discussion with these employees. To their credit, I know it's hard when you are asked to come sit in on something and somebody has to give you a lecture. It almost feels like college again. But they were very engaging and thoughtful with their questions. And shout out to my buddy Franco Greco over at NewDay. He's the chief revenue officer over there. I got an opportunity to come and speak to these 20-somethings. I mean, we'll call them Gen Zers, for lack of a better word. And it's because they have genuine questions. And I look back to, when I was 23, yes. I mean, we did buy our first house at 23. But I had no way of doing that by myself. I had, fortunately for me, a fiance who also made some pretty good money, and the market was a completely different place back then. And so I didn't really touch too much on my experience, my own personal experience there, but I did touch on a lot of, my experience with first-time home buyers and building, what that experience is like, how nerve-wracking it can kind of be. And you just don't know what you don't know. And so I wanted to part of me really wanted to put them at ease and give them the process and give them an idea of what the expectation should be and what has been told to them in the past, either by their parents or by older siblings or grandparents or whoever, and then also what they can expect in today's market, because those two things are not always the same thing. The market's always changing and the processes within the market are always changing. And so you can take advice from whoever you want, whenever you want, but the reality is advice is not going to matter if it doesn't apply to the situation. In our conversation with this was really about 40 to 50, young professionals fresh out of college trying to really get their feet wet in the financial space. We focused on the difficulty of clearing financial hurdles required to enter today's market. We talked about, what the front lines kind of look like right now. And the primary motivation for buyers is escaping volatility of rising rents, establishing a long-term investment that builds wealth. You got to start somewhere. I think for a lot of younger people, particularly our Gen Z crowd, the crowd that's in college, freshly out of college within the last 5 years, they don't really see a clear path to what homeownership looks like. And part of that is because no one's taught them. We do not have in our vocational schools or our primary schools or secondary schools any kind of class on how to become an adult, how to become a homeowner, how do you manage a bank account, what does this stuff mean? They don't teach it in college to anybody. So the system is flawed because we don't give people, particularly our young people, any kind of advantage at all. Everybody has to guess what to do next. And that is honestly pretty predatory if you sit back and think about it. So I think there is some kind of, and we talked about this a little bit in our discussion, there is almost a romanticizing of renting, especially when you come out. It's first off, it's easy. Secondly, you can make a call to somebody to fix something. You don't have to worry about it. And frankly, 90+% of people under the age of 40 have zero handy skills. You have an expiration on a lease. You can, in a lot of cases, vacate early without too much clawback, or, everything's case by case, but you get what I mean. And especially with young people, they're not really sure where they want to end up. Some of them might have a relationship, some of them don't. People might have a vision for themselves or a path, and that path is going to get diverted because life happens. What we had talked about on this discussion was there's a lot of reasons for people to move. People are getting married. People are getting divorced. They're getting together. They're breaking up. They're having children. They are watching the children leave the nest. They're moving for jobs. They're getting relocated by the military. They're moving for school. They're moving to be closer to family, moving to be closer to friends. When you're in your early 20s, you're very lucky if you have direction. You're very lucky if you feel like you have purpose and a good head on your shoulders. You feel like you have a plan. It's not common. And the easy thing to do is to decide, well, I don't really know where I'm going to land, so I will rent something. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Let me be clear. There is nothing wrong with renting. It serves a purpose, and it is not always the right option to purchase a property or, become a homeowner. It is not for everybody. But historically speaking, the most likely way, the most consistent way to build real wealth and security in America is through real estate. And frankly, globally, go back through all the time and you'll see most people that are the people that you read about in the history books, those are the ones that have the real estate. So it can seem daunting to somebody that's fresh out of college. No one that hasn't been taught how to apply for a mortgage. They haven't been taught what the process is for buying a house. They haven't been taught why buying a house can be a good idea. They haven't been taught much of anything when it comes to adulting. And that's a shame, because their parents were not taught, and the parents before them were not taught. And so everybody has to figure it out through experience, which, that kind of sucks. It really does. So we touched on that being a real sore spot, but it doesn't have to be the path. And so after giving these 40, 50 employees a little bit of background on me, I asked if anybody owns a home. Out of the 40 to 50, maybe 2 raised their hands. And we talked about buying a home being a deeply personal experience. They are combining, in most cases, any buyer, especially a first-time buyer, in a residential real estate transaction, you're really combining 3 things that people value greatly, and that would be money, family, and how they live. And when you mix those ingredients together, you can create some pretty interesting cocktails. You'll get some fiery personalities. You'll get some very sedative ones. You'll get things compounded when you've never done it before. And most people, when they start the journey of homeownership, will have everyone and their mother giving them advice and opinions because, well, in my day, this is what we did, or, so-and-so just did this. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Those people are there trying to help you, and that's fine. But it can be overwhelming for a first-time buyer, just like doing anything for the first time. You get a bunch of people yakking in your ear, please, buzz off. So I get that. There was a theme here that I'm not sure if it's going to resonate with our audience yet. It did take hold a little bit with them, and it's a little goofy one, but bear with me here. What I had told these guys and gals was one thing that they have to know about me as an agent, as a person. Batman is my favorite superhero. He's got a great look, gadgets galore. No superpowers to speak of, though. The dude could be doing anything else with his time, but he chooses to use his gifts, his money, his ambition to help others. Now, me personally, I'm a far cry from Bruce Wayne. I mean, the dude's a legend, even though he's a fictitious character. But that character has always spoken to me. And I realized that in doing this job as a real estate agent that is moderately successful, no matter how stressful it gets, the thing that keeps me coming back to doing this job is that feeling of service. I love helping people that need it. I like bonding with them. I like educating them. I like learning from them. I like learning with them and seeing them achieve something that matters deeply to them. I fell in love with that feeling of making a difference. It's not going to happen on every transaction. It's only going to happen every once in a while. You'll have some people that are, I've done this a bunch, and, yeah, you were good. I also feel like I was paying you a little bit too much. There's always going to be that. But when those moments come where somebody has a deep appreciation for what you do, it makes you feel like what you do matters. And it's those moments that I cherish and what keep me coming back. If you're a buyer's agent, you're basically a therapist when they need it. You're a paralegal when they need it. You're a mentor when they need it. You're a friend when they need it. And that connection with others makes the journey sweeter. And that connection is what keeps people coming back. So when we asked the audience how many people owned, there wasn't really a whole lot that raised their hands. There was like 2 out of the whole crowd. When you rent, you're building somebody else's balance sheet. That's not rocket science. I'm also not telling them something they don't already know. When you own, every payment builds your balance sheet. This is particularly interesting, I hope, to them because they're in finance. If, I get why somebody would be hesitant to buy. Sometimes they're not sure if they're staying in the area. Maybe they're in a relationship that's uncertain or a job that's uncertain. I mean, shoot, look at our government shutdown right now. I get that. I totally get that. It's not, the timing is a big part of this. Sometimes it is just easier to have roommates, and it's fun. It's fun. The market today is not what it was 10 years ago. So if you have older siblings or coworkers or friends that bought then, your parents bought then, the grandparents bought something since then, The average entry price is a lot higher. When I bought my first house, we bought it for mid twos. That same house sold now a second time actually, since we purchased it 13 years ago for, $100,000+ beyond that, with literally zero updating done to it. So the interest rates now are a lot higher, which make your payments higher. It's not easy to do this. And it's certainly not as easy as it used to be. So all that advice that you've been getting as a first-time home buyer, if you're now starting to look, hopefully it has evolved and taken stock of what the space is today. A lot of people end up getting pre-qualified by a lender for a lot more than they originally expect. But if you're buying a home, you're not always interested in what that amount is until you see what that payment looks like. And that payment might be like, oh my God, nope, no. Hang on, let's get it back closer to what my rental is. And so in this business, so the pre-approval process is probably the first place to start. You can certainly start with a real estate agent. A real estate agent can connect you with a really solid local lender that just knows A, how to get stuff done, B, has a great rapport with agents in the community, and C, and probably most importantly, is able to take your short-term wants and match them up with your long-term goals. And while it seems like, oh yeah, I mean, that would be easy to do, you also want them to do it in a way that you will appreciate, that is from a communication standpoint. And it's hard to find the right partner in there, but what I said was, you need a lender that is going to be your Batman. You need an agent that is going to be your Batman. You need people in your life in that field of it that are going to be looking out for your best interests and will not let you fail. If you fail on your own, that's on you. But if you tell me that this is what you want, you are qualified to go get it, we will find a way to get you something that you want. Some of the trepidation that young buyers have is credit issues. In most cases, it's actually not bad credit. They just don't have enough of it. So that's one thing. Not having enough cash is another. One of the myths that we talked about was the 20% down thing. There are plenty of opportunities out there to spend less than that. The 20% threshold gets rid of PMI, gets rid of that interest payment, which is really going to be the bulk of, the mortgage payment, especially early on. And I get that transaction cost and down payment and all that stuff is, when you're finally starting to feel like you're making a little bit of money, you're making some headway, you're starting to be a real freaking adult, you don't really want to see that money leave your bank account. I get that feeling, but disrupting that flow, as long as you have a consistent income stream, a reliable one, will be okay. We also joke that some of them are probably watching a lot of Selling Sunset and probably not interested in the beer budget that their buying power will support right now. They want to wait until they have that champagne budget so they can quench that champagne taste. So they'll keep renting at the Avalon or whatever nice complex is near all the fun and stuff because YOLO, right? Again, nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. You're just not going to build wealth that way. And we are not complainers. We are not going to be saying, oh man, well, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have done that. You have something within you called discipline. And if you have the discipline, you can get what you want out of this life. If it is not wealth in money or real estate, that's fine. Go be wealthy in whatever it is. But if you want to be wealthy this way, renting is probably not the best solution. So let's see here. A lot of the discussion that I've heard from buyers of ours and some of the people that we were talking to was waiting for rates to drop. That's a really, especially the last couple of years, it's been a really, really common one. Here's the thing. You absolutely get that. You can refinance later. There is never a guarantee that rates are going to go down, but in all likelihood, based over historic timelines, yes, there is more than likely an opportunity for you to refinance later down the line and get a reduced rate. Equity is not going to wait. That house right now that's worth, let's say, $500,000, that you don't feel like I'm close, but I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger on that. By the time you are ready, let's say it's a year from now, that house might be $550,000. Well, guess what? All that waiting that you did to wait for the rates to come down, you are still going to end up paying more money because now the sales price is higher. Now the taxes are higher. Now you've also gotten another year's worth of rent out of your pocket that you'll never see again. So while that is a very valid concern, it's slightly misguided. And another thing that we had mentioned, buying a house is a lot like having a child. You might think you're ready. You might not think you're ready, but you will be ready when you make a purchase. You'll figure it out. People have been doing it for a long time. People have been doing it in our modern day, left and right, for quite a bit of time. There are some ways that we've seen buyers get into the market in different ways than traditional. So traditional, you go, you buy your first house, and it's just you, or maybe it's you and a girlfriend, or you and a boyfriend, or a wife, or a husband, and you're sharing in the equity. And it's affordable, and you're kind of building your life. That's what most people think of as a traditional means. There are other solutions, house hacking, if you will. One is buying with friends. One is buying with family. If the bank of mom and dad is open, take advantage of it. It'd be a nice nest egg for them at some point. They also probably have the funds in a lot of cases, maybe not all. You could also buy solo, buy what you can afford, and you can rent out rooms to others, generate income that offsets that mortgage. Easier said than done. You got to really like the people that you're with. Nothing worse than a roommate who doesn't do any fucking dishes. That's a problem. And that's going to grind on you real quick. So find roommates. That's an option. Depending on the property and the buyer qualifications, there are some state and federal loans that are available to make ownership more accessible. So these different programs sometimes are based on your occupation. Are you a teacher? Are you a first responder? Are you a firefighter? Like, all right, well, we got some credits for you. We got some programs that are going to be like, less cash out of your pocket. Like, let's get you a house. Remember, the hardest thing, especially in today's social media, FOMO-driven, cult-like social personality, the first place is not the forever place. It's a launching pad. You're not going to get everything that you want. That's not the goal. The goal is to start somewhere, and that is the purpose of this discussion. The freedom that many renters believe they have comes from flexibility that they think they've got. I mean, it's a lease, so there's an expiration date. They don't have to worry about repairs or maintenance, and honestly, that does sound kind of nice. Until you realize that owning means that someone else controls your costs, they control your stability, and frankly, they control your future. You're not free. You're just temporarily comfortable while someone else builds wealth with your rent check. Again, doesn't mean that it's wrong. Renting serves plenty of purposes. You're just not building the wealth that you could through ownership. Freedom comes from assets, not flexibility. Remember that. So, where do you start the process of buying your first house? You start it where all smart people do. You talk to an expert. There's a million real estate agents out there, literally. Talk to your parents, talk to your siblings, talk to your friends, talk to your coworkers. Almost everyone in your life knows at least a few, particularly in Maryland. If I was to throw a rock right now, I'm hitting somebody outside. I mean, I got a pretty decent arm, not a great one. I can hit somebody with a real estate license no matter where I am. What you want to do first is identify your personal goals and interests. Write them down. What you're looking for in a home. Are you looking for more of an investment? Are you looking for a lifestyle? When you have answers to those questions and you have some good self-reflection, you have a starting point. Most apps now will include a feature, so whether it's a Zillow or a Redfin or a Compass or whatever, they're going to include a feature where you can research agents. You can look at their sales history. You can look at their reviews, whatever. The ones that catch your eye you should reach out to with what your goals are and see if they're interested in helping you. And you'll know when you find the right person because they'll put you at ease. You know, they'll appear like you've got a partner in doing this with you. For those of you that have that tweaker cousin out there who just got his license a few weeks ago, yes, he is going to be pissed at Thanksgiving. But you have to do the right thing for you. Do not let family or friends or reputation or something like that get in the way. Don't worry about it because that will all blow over. You want to deal with somebody that you can deal with and that also knows what they're doing. From there, you got to get aligned with the financial partners or look at your lender. Same concept here. They need to understand your long-term goals as well as short-term so you position yourself for success. Maybe that means repairing credit. Maybe it means building more of a down payment. Maybe it means pre-qualifying for certain grants or state programs. There's a ton of options. But before you go out looking at stuff, this was new development since the last time that I had spoken to this company. All agents are now required to have a signed agreement with their buyers stating what the buyers represented. So you have somebody in there negotiating on your behalf, able to get you in and out of these properties, and how the agent is compensated for their service at closing. 99% of the time, the seller actually pays for your representation because it behooves them to find somebody who is a ready, willing, and able purchaser. The new buyer agency document spells out what happens if the seller does not do that, and that is the change. Or what happens if the seller's only offering a portion of what the commission, the typical commission would be. Well, then it's all spelled out there, so you don't have to play this guessing game. So in all reality, it has not been really that much of a hiccup for the real estate agent industry. I digress. So the tours are really like the fun part. I mean, that's where you get to be a little voyeur and start picturing yourself in certain spaces. That is fun. Damn. And that's where most of the connection comes in too. It's one of my favorite things, going and touring houses, preferably not the uggos and the yucky ones. Those are not as fun. The really nice ones though, man. Yes, I too can be a voyeur and picture myself in just about anything. But when you find the one, you'll know. Your agent's going to walk you through the process of the offer, including what their recommendations are, but you'll decide what you want to offer and how. So let's see what that looks like, right? You're basically doing three things when you're putting an offer together. You're telling somebody what you're going to buy their property for. You're going to tell them when you're going to buy it, and then how. The how is the real meat and potatoes of the contract. I mean, a Maryland contract can range anywhere from 30 to 60 pages, with it being finance, which is going to be, 90+% of our first-time home buyers. You're looking at a 50 to 60 page contract. It's long. It is complicated and redundant. And frankly, a lot of the stuff on there doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But you don't have like a week and a half to review all of the options like you used to. I mean, hell, when I got into real estate in 2013, you could go to a killer listing and it would be available for you for the next week, to go back. Let's take another look at it. We got some time. Let's go measure for furniture. You know what? Let's go back a third time. What was the driveway like? You actually had time to process and make all of these decisions. You don't have that time anymore. And that's been a revelation really since 2020 and has not dissipated much at all. There are certainly pockets where you are afforded a little bit more time, but by and large, the premier locations do not afford anybody the time to process. So when you do go to look at a house, you had better be comfortable and better be ready to go. You had better know how much you're willing to pay, when you will be willing to pay it, and how you are going to do it. Because it will, in a lot of cases, get very competitive. Do you know what the earnest money is? Do you know what the financial components of this is? Do you know what the inspectors are going to be looking for? Can we even get this contract if we have inspections in it? Can we even get this contract if we're financing it? There's a lot of what ifs that only a dedicated seasoned agent can tell you who is in the market every day in that location. So you go through these contingencies and you figure out, all right, here's what I can do for this property. This is where I feel good. And we walked through, bunch of different scenarios on what to do and why it's not as simple as saying, hey, here's what I'm going to do. You also have to have a seller who is willing and able to do the stuff that you want. And they might have different things that they want than you. In most cases, they do. And that is why it is a negotiation going back and forth. Most of the negotiation is around timing and condition. Not as much around price, but certainly that's a big component of it. That was something that really is not going to be something that you are able to process until it's your turn. And what I mean by that is you might get so excited as a first-time buyer that you feel like this is the one. And then you finally go out and look at it and you put that offer in, you're feeling good, and then somebody else beats you. And it's devastating. What you don't know is that person that beats you has lost out on 4 other properties that they thought were the one. And so they said, fuck it. I'm going to eliminate contingencies and I'm going to get it done. And that is the reality of a short inventory market. That just is what it is. So they were super gracious with their time. The conversation, I did have a couple of fun little pivots throughout. And one of them was, hey, as a young person who is interested in getting a home sometime in the next couple of years, I have an idea of what my target date is for that. Right now I'm 23 or 25 and I want to have that house by 26, 27. I think that's awesome. And they said, what, other than vibes, what do I have to look for in a real estate agent? I mean, what kind of questions should I be asking them? And I said, shit, well, that is a good question, because your buyer agent should be the one asking you a ton of questions that you might not have asked yourself already. And, they're going to have to deal with budget and lifestyle and what you're looking for, so they can kind of pinpoint where they need to be searching, and they want to know your timing and stuff like that. But questions that the buyer should have to a prospective buyer agent, I said, you should ask them how they work. What does working with you as the buyer agent look like for me? Are you a texter? Do you pick up the phone and call? Are you a big emailer? Do you have a internal platform that can kind of keep me updated and up to speed? Do I, frankly, am I going to enjoy the personality with this person? There's a lot of things that really don't go said in most cases. So I thought that was a pretty fun exercise to figure out, actually, shoot, what would I maybe not have trouble answering if a buyer posed it, but What are things that I don't normally get asked that I should? And that was one. How do you work? What's my expectation? Am I going to drive around in the car with you? Or am I going to meet you at different places? Are we going to have a weekly touch base? Are we going to have a monthly touch base? Like what's my expectation so that I can feel comfortable moving forward and making sure that I am finding the partner that's aligned with all of my goals. Another question would be the compensation component of it, because the reality of the commission lawsuits, settlements from a year ago in 2024, it is now a topic of discussion that it wasn't before. So what do you charge for your services is another question. A buyer agent should be able to articulate that in a pretty, eloquent, succinct way. This is what we charge. Here's why we charge it. Here's the things that we do for that. Now, caveat, most of the time, virtually all of the time, that fee is covered by the seller's side. In the event that it's not, I'm required to let you know, and we will predefine what happens in that instance. Does it mean that you're going to come up with more money? Does it mean that, me as the buyer agent, I'm going to have to eat, the remainder costs? I'm getting less fee than I would ordinarily get. That's not really a fun thing for anybody. But you have to have those conversations with them so that, transparency is there. We did talk a little bit about the Maryland market snapshot and how inventory is still incredibly tight. Interest rates, while coming down, are still, they're more than what they had been. Historically, on a historic level, they're about average right now. Some still in the sixes, but we were spoiled for years with 2, 3, 4% rates. And you hear rate talk all the time, and you don't understand as a layman, why do I give a shit about a rate until you see the difference in what the payment is for the same exact house at the same exact price with a different interest rate. So it is a big deal. But that discussion really kind of sparked something that I wanted to dive into today. And that was, damn, I feel for the Gen Zers out there. They have got to be in the most difficult path that we've seen in modern history in order to obtain a home, to get a slice of that American dream that is so coveted and so American. There's less houses for people to buy. The prices are higher. The interest rates are higher. And the people that are scooping them up, the limited availability, and by and large are not people. The things that are affordable in that first time home buyer market, there's not a lot of humans that are buying them. It is these corporations, and they might be disguised in some other kind of show, but it's your BlackRocks and things like that that are driving price up because they know having real estate increases wealth. It is not fair. It is wrong. And in that, it is killing the American dream. And it has put the starter home on life support, if not killed it. And so that is the meat of our discussion today. Why are all these financial maneuvers necessary for, I mentioned a little bit earlier, a couple of different options that are available to, today's first-time home buyer, today's young 20-something. And why do they have to have maneuvers? This is crazy. Well, it's because prices have skyrocketed, creating a fundamental disconnection between wages and asset values. Globally, affordability is worse now than even the 2007, 2008 crisis. I mean, it's ridiculous. The national median home price surged 44% from December of 29 to December of 24. In Maryland, the median home price hit $420,000 in March, well above the national median of basically $400,000. Quantifying the down payment needed for a median priced Maryland home is approximately $67,000. This is why the average age of a first-time U.S. home buyer has risen significantly, reaching an all-time high of 38 to 40 years old. Are you fucking kidding me? 40 years old for your first purchase. This delay strips buyers of critical years of compounding equity gains and just continues severely widening the generational wealth gap. It's bullshit. The state's first-time buyer index remains below 100 across all jurisdictions and has continued to fall year over year over year. And frankly, no one's doing shit about it. And while Maryland metro areas like the DC, Baltimore corridor have high costs, you still have some counties that remain comparatively affordable. You have places like Allegheny County, Somerset County, Baltimore City, Dorchester County, Wicomico over on the shore. There are opportunities, but they're not really in the places that used to be. It means sacrificing proximity to high wage paying job centers, imposing the cost of long commutes and diminished labor market flexibility. I mean, that's what it comes down to. This is why more people are renting. And when more people are renting, guess what else rises? The freaking rent rates. So you tell me how that's fair. High prices are a symptom. The underlying disease is really a chronic structural shortage of housing supply that's been driven by rigid regulation, which is why there was a lot of uproar during this last election cycle. And no, we are not going to discuss politics on this show. But the U.S. housing market is short approximately 4.9 million housing units. Maryland alone has said they need at least an estimated almost 600,000 new units to accommodate projected growth through 2045. And I can speak for Anne Arundel County. I mean, there's really not a whole lot more to develop here. The shortage is why prices are so inelastic. Maryland's regulatory framework emphasizes local control over land use. Local governments restrict housing development through low-density zoning and urban containment strategies. 70% of residential areas in major cities restrict or ban multifamily apartments, which also limits supply. This regulation and supply discussion is going to play out in policy debates over zoning bills in Baltimore in particular. Proponents are arguing that these measures will boost multifamily options, but critics are skeptical, arguing that the measures they're only going to help developers cut costs without guarantees of true affordability in starter homes. There's a necessary reform that is facing political resistance from neighborhood defenders who claim that zoning changes will abolish the suburbs. Well, whether they're right or wrong, that also adds to a supply problem. If the supply problem is the disease, then these institutional investors are the powerful catalysts that compound the damage, specifically at the critical entry point, the starter home. The narrative often suggests that Wall Street is this, primary culprit, but honestly, institutional investors, which own over 100 properties, they account for less than 1% of the national housing stock. They are not really the cause of the $4.9 million units shortage that we have right now. However, their activity is acutely focused on the bottom price tier, the first, which is really the entry point for first-time buyers. So academic research has found that higher institutional purchases caused 2.2 0.29 percentage points higher price growth specifically in this bottom price segment, which led to a large negative effect on affordability. They're not buying real nice stuff. They're not buying the high-end stuff. They're buying the first-time home buyer, the starter home. That's what they're buying. And it's because these institutional buyers have superior financing advantages. They're paying cash. And that allows them to consistently outbid owner occupants. Again, not fair. Historically, fixer-uppers were the starter homes. I mean, make sure they're in a decent location for the most part, right? But the fixer-uppers were starter homes, and now investors possess most of the internal capacity and discounts to renovate these distressed homes. They do it cost effectively. They remove the low-priced inventory from the reach of owner occupants who rely on traditional mortgages, and they rent them out. That's what's happening. Incremental solutions are not going to fix a structural problem. We need deep-seated policy changes that tackle supply, speculation, and affordability. Legislative efforts in Maryland, like the proposed Home Commission, a Housing Opportunities Made Equitable Commission, they aim to study and recommend ways to improve supply, aligning with, bipartisan efforts like the Home Reform Act of 2025 to cut federal red tape and accelerate construction. That is one thing that President Trump ran on that I think most people, despite the messenger, can get behind. Make construction a little bit easier. You certainly want everything to be safe and affordable, but make it easier for people to build properties so that we can fill the supply and relieve some of the pressure that our buyers are getting. Independent economists favor a land value tax. So if they are taxing the land's value based on its highest and best use, which I can assure you they do in Anne Arundel County, LVT, land value tax, raises the holding cost of vacant and underutilized land. It forces landowners to develop or sell, shit or get off the pot. And that would increase, in theory, it's going to increase supply, reducing some, speculative pricing pressure. There's also community land trusts that offer permanent affordability. They separate the ownership of the land from the building and drive down the initial home price significantly. Because if you think about it, the price of the land can be 20 to 50% of the sales price. And that really depends on the location and what the land is, but it's a lot. The CLT retains the land and imposes permanent resale restrictions, keeping the home affordable for the next low-income buyer. The problem is where they want to put those is always up for debate. Nobody wants to live next to it that is, in some established suburb. So it's a constant battle. Where are we going to put people? Maryland already has an affordable housing land trust law, and organizations like Charm City CLT or Coppin Heights CLT that are operational, and they are providing a scalable model for stability, but it is still no end in sight right now for our Gen Zers. And with the national home buyer now reaching 30, damn near 40 years old for a first-time home buyer, it is probably the most critical time in our country's financial history to get our young people, in particular, housing that they can afford, that they can start building a life with, whether it's an investment property or a primary residence. That is the America that we've come to dream about and know and love. Not this where we have everybody priced out. It's not sustainable. It's beyond the fact that it's not fair. It is not sustainable. And We need our politicians to do better. We need our communities to be a little bit more open about what they will accept. We need our governments on the local and state level to be run better and really take out the self-service that has been a sickness that has affected all of our politicians seemingly, except to save a few, decent people out there that have taken the mantle and truly done it for public service. That's what we need. The starter home, as we once knew it, is, in fact, dead in Maryland. It's a victim of macroeconomic shock, hitting the fault of a chronic regulatory failure. The future of homeownership in the state, and with it, generational wealth and social mobility, rests on the political will to enact profound reforms, dismantling this exclusionary zoning, combating this land speculation, building permanent affordability through some community-controlled models. There is solutions out there. And for our brothers and sisters that are fresh out of college, trying to make their way in life, I pray that sometime in the near future, their dream will not have to wait 20 years to be realized. I pray for them that they get to realize the same thing that their father and mother and brothers and sisters ahead of them have had the opportunity to experience and enjoy. So that's my time. Catch you on the next Open Floor.